welcome to those that are going to be watching online after today. We know that time zones are always a challenge, but we believe that this topic is really important to understand kingdom camping. So I'm just going to introduce Chris to you. Chris has been a person that I have worked with for over 7 years and has become a personal friend, his wife and children. And Chris is someone that really hears from God about how to share the love of Jesus with other people, how to grow leaders, how to give people an opportunity to lead. Chris is a phys ed teacher. He's worked in the outdoors at a camp for a period of time, and then has become a very close and valued trainer for Christian camping in New Zealand. And Chris first met Alicia, who was on my team in the States, and then we had a chat when she returned. And the kind of discussion was very brief because I just knew after a few minutes of talking with Chris that he was the person that was going to be able to lead us in growing our young people in leadership. And one of the most amazing things is the way that he trains people around their value, their identity, and their purpose in life, the one that God has designed for them. So, Chris, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thanks, Jenny. And hello, CCI. And hello to all of our friends out there who are not with us right now, but will be listening to this later. It's a really great privilege to be speaking to the globe. And perhaps I'll share a little bit about why that's such a privilege, because there's been this big story that God's been unraveling for us there. And yeah, but what an honor to share something that God's really put in my heart. So really today's talk is about Kingdom Camping, which is a book that I put together. So it's one of the advantages that COVID really had for me. I could finally sit down and put together all of these ideas in one place, and then all of our training comes out of that as well. So to everybody, no matter where you are, a warm Aussie welcome. So g'day, mate, to you. And we will just get in and share a few things. So I wanted to introduce my family very quickly. So Gretchen there in the pink is my beautiful wife, and you guys will get a chance to hear a little bit more from her. She is a psychologist with a really strong calling in helping people in their mental and emotional wellness. She's incredibly gifted. In fact, she was so gifted at this, I figured it was cheaper for me to marry her than to come to her for sessions. And we have 3 lovely kids: Kaya in the blue, Tamison in the white, and Oliver, our young man. So that photo's a little bit older. They're all a little bit taller than that now. But they're just great. We're blessed with really great kids. So this whole story really comes about from, it's just a journey of solving some problems. So as Jenny said, I was a phys ed teacher for 20 years, and then God moved me from where I was into outdoor education. And so when I arrived in the first week, my boss came to me and said, Chris, we've employed you as a teacher to solve a whole bunch of problems. We've got all of these schools that come to us. We need better facilitators, and we want to grow our business. So that was really my Aussie journey of solving problems. And then I got to meet Alicia and Jenny in New Zealand and got a chance to help them solve some of their problems. And as it turned out, some of the things we were doing in Australia were very helpful. They wanted some leadership training. They had a gap in that space. They needed better facilitators too, and they wanted to grow their coaches. They wanted to coach their managers to have a much more relational leadership approach. And then probably what might be starting today, though I've had opportunity to visit some camps in Canada. So hello to my friends Mark and Ellen at Muskoka and Bruce over at Madiba. You guys have been incredibly influential in this journey. And so many thanks to you. But there's this global journey. And I guess underneath today for me is this question: what are the needs in the globe, and how can Kingdom Camping help you with solving those problems? So I want to go through those 3 experiences. The Aussie experience will be the longer one because it kind of is the birthing place for Kingdom Camping. we realized that it's really all about the heart. So that's probably summing up the Aussie experience, but now I'll unpack all of the detail. So when my boss came to me in the first week, he said, here's some of the context that we have in Australia. So at our camp, our goal was to host over 100 school camps a year. We decided that teachers actually don't know why they come to camp. They just keep coming out of habit. And so we actually saw that was a space where we could tell teachers why they come to camp, because camp can do things for kids that schools can't. And as it turned out, over the 3.5 years I was full-time there, we had teachers that were leaving their teaching job and coming and working for us at Luther Heights Youth Camp, because we were doing in 3 or 4 days what they couldn't do in a whole year in terms of the spiritual development and the pastoral development of their kids. We wanted at our camp to intentionally disciple school kids, no matter what school they came from, whether they were Christians or it was a religious school, or whether it was a secular school. We wanted to solve that problem. There were limitations on what we could say. And so my boss said to me in that first week, Chris, this is your goal. I want you to go out and I want you to be Jesus, but I don't want you to say Jesus. Because he figured that we would probably lose some business in the context here in Australia, particularly with secular schools, if schools were coming and they just didn't want to be preached to, but we needed to teach. And so how do we actually manage that and do that differently? And then we had a challenge with our staff that were running activities. We have about a 50% staff changeover every year to every 3 years. So we needed to keep training people. Now, the Australian context, part of this will be the envy for lots of nations, because we have a nationally funded chaplaincy project. And so these are Christians who are working in schools. A lot of my Australia talk is going to be about camping for schools. This is really remarkable that this happens. And so what that meant was, what we could do at camp is we could be supporting chaplains and working and buddying up beside them and supporting what they're doing in schools when kids come to camp. We have a decline in church and faith-based interest in Australia, but an increase in mental and emotional illness. And so lots of the kids coming to camp are in this pot of not being quite so mentally and emotionally well. And so we needed to address all of these issues. And so, like my boss said, really the goal is to be Jesus, because he's the answer for all of those problems. So then my job was to really flesh out, what does that mean? How do we actually do that? How do we be Jesus? And it didn't take long to realize that in the being of Jesus, we were not very good. We had so many problems in being Jesus. Most of the staff that we had that were interfacing with the kids would use shame, blame, fear-based control in their verbal interactions with the kids. And this really just didn't put the kids in a place where they had a high level of emotional safety at the campsite. We missed a lot of opportunities to disciple. We had really low level of facilitation ability. We really weren't, we were a Christian campsite, but you could probably walk in there and not see any difference between a non-Christian campsite and our campsite during the mechanics of the day. And we're like, we need to change that. And so we needed Jesus to be a central part of everything that we did every day. And we needed his heart for the kids that were coming. And we realized that a lot of our facilitators actually didn't have a heart for kids. They really had a heart for the activity or for the outdoors. And so we scrapped the whole way that we employed people. We started employing people that had a heart for kids and then taught them the skills, because we wanted our staff to be Jesus to the kids. So in terms of a discipleship modality, then what might happen, and it didn't happen terribly often, but at the end of a 3, 4, or 5 day camp, people would come up and say, hey, that was so amazing. I can't believe what you did. What was that? And we were able to say, well, you just experienced Jesus. And so we weren't sharing him as the first thing. We would share him maybe as the last thing, but we were really intentional about being Jesus to everybody. So to break down some of the elements, what is Kingdom Camping? It's really this fusion of a whole lot of things. We took all of the elements of outdoor education, both the practicals and the intellectuals, and we merged it with some developmental psychology. We added some adventure therapy, and we put in some leadership development. And then, of course, we wanted this thread of spiritual formation and discipleship through the whole program. So there's a lot to it, but then once it gets up and going, it's a really powerful and effective way of running a culture in a camp that allows us to develop the things that our kids and our staff and our managers need to work well. And again, the summary was, how do we be Jesus? We realized we just had to grow his heart in people. And here's some of the specifics now. So for those of you who are really into adventure-based learning, ABL, then this will strike some chord with you, and you'll see some of the similarities. And for those of you who are very discipleship focused, you'll see some similarities. And for those of you that have some psychology background, you will see some similarities. And you'll see all of these threads and all of these elements coming through the program. So the first thing we needed to do was learn to set up his kingdom culture. And we went to, you can see at the bottom there, a group called Vital Projects. Vital stands for values integrated through action-based learning. And these guys taught our team how to facilitate, how to set up kingdom culture. And they used 3 principles, and these 3 principles are on the screen. They would go beyond rules. And so we would actually set up a camp that wasn't just base rules. We'd go way beyond rules. And the reason that we did that was because we wanted the best behavior of the kids. And we realized when we only set up rules, we actually got the lowest level of behavior from kids. And that's not what we wanted. We needed to go beyond fear. And so we needed to remove all of the shame, all of the blame, all of the fear. And we had specific strategies that we used to do that. And then we needed to go beyond lectures. And so we didn't want a camp where kids would come and just keep lecturing. And so I guess there's a part where even me presenting today goes against the very grain of kingdom camping, because me just sitting here and blabbing on about what we're doing is just not the way we would do it at all. If I was to sit and talk to somebody in this kind of context, we would have had at least an hour of building trust, building rapport, building connection between people before you even knew that what I had to say was worthwhile to you, because you'd gotten to know me and I'd gotten to know you. So there you go, the bit of the paradox of this presentation. But we wanted kids to not be sitting down and listening. We wanted them to be involved. We wanted to hear what they had to say, because unless we actually got them to be leaders, well, then they weren't practicing leadership. And so we started to invest this concept of kingdom and what that meant. And it's actually one of Jesus's most talked about topics. The next thing that we did was we wanted to grow and build people using Christ-like values in formal and informal ways. And what Jesus was teaching us was this actually tills the seed into their heart. So during this process, God introduced us to Matthew 13 in a way that we've never seen it before. And you'll be familiar with the parable of the 4 soils. And sometimes it's called the parable of the sower. And Jesus said to us, this, for your context, this has got nothing to do with the sower, and this has got nothing to do with the seed. I just want you to understand soil. And he said, I want you to understand that there's 4 soils here. And of these 4 soils, there's only one that grows anything that lasts a long time. And when you use Christ-like values to till seed into the heart of your campers and your staff and your managers and your leadership, then you are actually creating a place where there'll be a 30, 60, and 100-fold return. And that's what I want. So that's the biblical background. And so God empowered us with that. So that's what we would do. And so we would use these cards, and the simple process of actually speaking about values and how to use values in all of the contexts and all of the games. And sometimes we do it really formally with cards. Sometimes we just have a conversation. It would really depend on the context. But we would always be going back to, what did you grow? And what would life be like if you use this more away from the camp setting, now that you've learned that here? And naturally, there's just so much richness in the pictures of tilling the heart. And we'd speak about the culture of the soil. And the culture is where, if you were to grow something now, the culture of the soil is the bacteria that actually enables all of the growth. And so if you have really bad soil, then you don't grow very much. But if you've got great nutritious soil, you grow heaps. And we were finding, based on what teachers were saying, that we were growing kids faster at camp than they were back at school. In fact, some teachers were saying the kids grew so much socially and emotionally in 3 days at camp, more than they could in a whole year at school. We found that quite profound feedback. The next way that we were trying to be like Jesus was we wanted to serve campers by meeting their needs in the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual realms. And we dived into the spaces of social work, psychology, and Christian ministry. And we modified a few things here to meet the camp context. And the outcome was really hitting the needs of the campers that come. And we realized that most poor behavior from kids is actually because their needs are not being met. And so we specifically went after their needs. This model here is William Glass's choice theory. There are lots of needs models out there. And then we modified that little bit and we added in forgiveness, because we realized that if you don't meet someone's needs, you actually need a way to reset it if something goes pear-shaped. And so if we started hitting these needs really strategically, and these became some of the threads that we would put through every camp, then kids just thrived. Like, it would be 2 hours at camp and kids are changing their behavior, and the teachers were telling us and noticing. And all we were doing was setting up kingdom culture, using Christ-like values, and specifically going after meeting their needs. The next way that we were trying to be like Jesus was we started to structure the program and all of the content around the VIP framework. And Jenny mentioned this before, and this is quite a cool story. In setting up Kingdom Camping, we've had a couple of really profound, how would you say, visitations from God, some profound prophetic experiences. We had this experience one night here on our bed where God just came and he gave us a vision. And during this vision, he showed us an island that came out of the ocean. And we realized later that as the island got bigger and bigger, these sheer cliffs around the island were actually the rock of Christ. And so Christ was in the middle of this ocean, and this ocean resembled the tumultuousness of the world's culture. And on top of the ocean, there was a cross, and that was the highest point of the island. And so we realized that Jesus owned this island. There was a massive lighthouse in the middle, which is the reason that we now call ourselves Lighthouse Leadership, Psychology and Training. And there was a building at the bottom of the island, and this building was where people came to stay. And then as this vision went on, God showed us this gold-colored liquid all across the island. And later he told us that this was the oil of the Holy Spirit. And then he showed us through this vision that our family was a lighthouse family, that people would come out of this ocean, they would come up onto the ocean for respite, and that they would be ministered to by our family, and then they would leave. And now the other side of the ocean, the island, the ocean was calm and peaceful. Then in this vision, and the vision's all in the book in more detail, he showed us that this was a picture of our workplace at the campsite, that schools would come to us and they would leave their culture and they'd come for respite on this kingdom culture on the top of this island, and then they would leave in peace. And then he showed us that there was also a picture of Australia, and that nations would come to Australia and they would be ministered to through kingdom culture, and then they would leave in peace. Now, there was 4 interesting waves in this ocean, and these waves were fear, judgment, control, and condemnation. And as we looked at these waves, we realized that these waves were coming against the ocean in raging force, and they were trying to actually destroy the island. But what happened was, as these waves hit the rock of Christ, this wall, fear, judgment, and condemnation would get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And this little word was coming out, and this word was deception. And so we realized that this was a spiritual principle, that as we came against deception, that fear, judgment, control, and condemnation would leave. And so these are the elements that we built into the structure of our camp. We needed to come against fear against judgment, against control, and against condemnation. We needed to call out all of the deception, and that this would be a way of ministering to the heart of everybody who came, whether it was a family coming to us, whether it was a school coming to the camp, hopefully, and I don't know how this works here, whether it's a nation coming to Australia, so that they could be ministered to by Kingdom Camping and then leave in peace. Now, the core of this ended up being value, identity, and purpose. And this has got a couple of different places. So we would minister to kids and teach them about, very overtly, about their value, their identity, and their purpose. And for our Christian camps, we would speak about what does God value, what is God's identity, and what is God's purpose. And between the interplay of those two things, we just found profound and transformational development in kids' leadership as they spent time in these topics. God showed us that in the heart, so back to the heart, it's all about changing the heart, that there's three core questions of the heart. Am I important? Who am I? And why am I here? And this corresponds to value, identity, and purpose. And so this was such a surprise because he gave us two things at different times. And so we would spend time speaking about the core questions of our heart to the school kids that would come. And then further on, when we went to New Zealand, we'd spend a lot of time in our leadership development with managers all the way down the age group, down to youth leaders, speaking about value, identity, and purpose. Then God gave us in another download. I was actually in the shower. I have all of my major prophetic downloads from God around water. So I'm either on the throne or I'm in the shower or I'm out in the water, out in the ocean. And so I got to have an opportunity to chat with an international psychologist named Dr. Robbie Sonderegger, and he's well known for his work in Africa, transforming the minds of childhood soldiers so that they can be normal members of population and community again. Amazing work. And I said to him, hey, look, I'm doing this leadership stuff. Can you give me some tips? And he said, yes. I don't want you to do any leadership development with any young person until they know their value, their worth, and their identity, who they are. And then he said, you need to grow their character. And so in speaking with God, I said, so you've given us VIP and you've given us a number of levels of leadership. We have to lead ourselves. We have to lead together. We need to lead others, and we want to grow leaders. How does that all work? I said to him, do you have any more VIP acronyms? And he just laughingly said to me, Chris, I made language. I have got more VIP acronyms than you even know. And if I didn't already know that God was a comedian, I certainly saw it that day. And so our whole model now is based on VIP acronyms. So you can see at the bottom of this lighthouse, the foundation, the rock of Christ is our value, our identity, and purpose based on Christ. When it comes to leading others, what's really important are our virtues or our values, our influence, and our power. That's how we deal with conflict. When it comes to leading together, what's really important in our heart is our heart's ability to produce valor, which is courage in the battle, our ability to be integrous, and how we position ourselves with other people. And then when we're growing leaders, the most important thing for their heart was to grow vulnerability, intimacy, and presence. And we realized that that actually produced a culture in leaders, if they were vulnerable, intimate, and present, that would enable the value, the identity, and the purpose of the next generation to be built. So even though you can see in this model here that the model just goes up, there's this cycle where the top part, vulnerability, intimacy, and presence, actually sets the foundation for value, identity, and purpose to be formed in the next generation. There are 4 outcomes at the top, and you can see that the light at the top of the lighthouse shows those, and these are the 4 outcomes. We realized that as we started to grow people's heart in kingdom culture, using values, having VIP as the framework, that the outcomes we were getting was improvements in character for everybody, even the leaders and the facilitators, but especially the campers. We realized that if we focused on connection, that really helped, and connection was one of the outcomes. This improved the quality and the health of community, and it helped us build transformational culture that left a legacy. And we wanted to do that. And we used to have this saying that our ceiling needed to be the next generation's floor. So we were holding them up, we were honoring them, and we were building them up to be even better than us. And we wanted that dynamic to be happening at our camp. Okay, there's a lot of information there, and the training for me beforehand probably took about I don't know, 6 years, and the training to actually learn how to do this now, we've broken it down into different pieces, probably takes about 3 weeks. But once the action of it starts happening, it's really powerful. And it's not like you have to redo everything at camp and do everything completely differently. It's actually just twisting and turning and tweaking things so that you get kingdom operating in a much more effective manner. The next thing that we used to actually be Jesus is we wanted to use optimum teaching and learning strategies because we wanted to integrate the camping experience immediately. We didn't want people leaving camp and it not changing their life. We wanted to transform them. And so we went to ABL for this. And so most of our presenting of activities, we used adventure and action-based learning. We used experiential learning because that's the best way for it to stay in the brain and to stay in the heart. And we used high-level intentional debriefing. And so we went into adventure therapy and we looked at adventure therapy debriefing models for this. And of course, to educational psychology. And so that's where those elements came from. So that's the Aussie experience. So that's what we learned in Australia. And then we got to meet with Jenny and Alicia and started to take this to New Zealand. And Jenny, this is where I might kick to you for a minute and you can share a couple of the needs that you had in New Zealand. And I know one of the things that you said to me was you wanted me to come over because there was a void in leadership development and delivery.
Yeah, so that's right, Chris. I guess we had noted over a period of time that camps individually were really struggling to develop programs when they had a very small team. So our larger sites were able to perhaps, have a ministry team that was 3, 4, 5 people. But when you had a small camp that was like, two staff, their ability to develop some good models and some programmings was really reduced, and that they felt that they were always behind. So in engaging Chris and Gretchen and also Alice, we were able to develop, based on the needs that we saw and the void that we had, some programming that became, I think, life-changing. And together, just looking at how does a young person operate? How do they best learn? How do they retain information? So, and looking at how we could do that, Chris developed programs that had a teaching component around whether it was a value or some scripture or something that we felt was really important. And then there was always this action-based learning tool to get it reinforced. And then there was the debriefing. And so there were topics that we chose to train on for our young leaders was around prayer and hearing the voice of God and leadership and how to read your Bible. And I think we ended up with 7 or 8 of those. And they became a really amazing resource for our camps to be able to either use it over a whole week, to pick it up as maybe one study or as multiple. So it was a tool that was to be able, to be used in lots of different settings. And then going on to realize that our managers had quite specific needs as well. And so some of them even struggled leading themselves, least of all leading others and a team. And so that's where Chris and Gretchen came in, along with Alice, to develop some programs that were really valuable. And I remember being at Willow Park Camp, and Chris had all these words on the floor, and they were statements. They were just single words. But on the other side was the opposite. And to see this revelation of camp directors walking around and looking at these words and identifying with them, and then when they were turned over, they realized that that was a significant change in their thought process and their heart process. And I will never forget that significant moment for people where they realized that there was potential for change. Do you want to unpack that more, Chris?
Probably not so specifically. I might pan out and do a bit more general, because we kind of targeted your needs at 3 different levels. And you can see that on the screen. So we used Kingdom Camping modality to present collaborative leadership trainings. So with Alicia, the leadership coordinator for New Zealand at the time, there's a number of different regions in New Zealand, and those regions were already doing collaborative leadership events. But the collaborative leadership events at that time, everybody was doing something different. And the benefit of that was everybody was trying to target what the needs were in their region. But what Alicia wanted to do was she wanted to streamline that, and she wanted some consistency so that, and an uplift in skill, in facilitation, and in understanding of what we're trying to achieve. So then, for the last for 5 years, I think it was, we joined with Alicia, and we were running these collaborative leadership events, and we would go into these regions and we would help them by running that camp, and then we would use the Kingdom camping modality to teach them what the specific needs were. And we've got a whole bunch of different camps. We have 5 different ones now, focusing on 5 different elements that we needed to do. Out of that, then we started to select leaders that had great potential to be influencers in their region. And then we pulled them aside and we started to train those youth leaders in how to use Kingdom camping modality. And we called this camp Fast Track. And then we started to pull out some full-time leaders from camps as well. And that was called Lead Out. And the whole idea was to actually start getting the facilitators and the camping people at New Zealand to be able to do what I could do. And my job was to transfer my skill set onto them so that New Zealand wasn't dependent on me at every camp and Gretchen. They could start doing this for themselves. The unexpected thing that happened there was the whole program and the training, which was about 4 or 5 days, started really transforming their lives, because everybody's got little blockages in their value, their identity and purpose. Everybody's got little blockages in their relationship with God. And so we would teach a lot of God connection and a lot of people connection skills. And what happened then, when you sort of open up the plug, so to speak, and God starts speaking to you more, however that is, whether it's through scripture, through other people, through relationship, through prayer, or even a bit more directly, and you start pulling out the plug and you build connection between people, and as the vulnerability becomes safe, then you actually have people speaking into your life in a much more profound way. And people were changing amazingly. We weren't expecting that. We were just wanting to train them how to do Kingdom camping modality. And yeah, and so the fruit now is that we have over 30 leaders who are working in camps, and some of them have actually gone on to their university degrees, because we targeted high school kids. But now they get to be influencers for the nation. They have all of this knowledge about how to facilitate, about how to lead, about how to look after their heart, about how to grow a heart of leadership into other people. And so no matter what they go into, so we've got guys and girls going into medicine and into engineering and into nursing, and some of them have moved into full-time camp ministry. So yeah, super stoked to see just how impactful this material was in an everyday context. The next thing that we did was we started to share, as Jenny was saying, Kingdom camping modality with managers. And the things that grew there that were next to Kingdom camping that we didn't expect was just the personal leadership growth, the personal development, and the culture development. We were going after culture development. We wanted managers to see what we were doing and see how it worked. And I guess to buy in and say, hey, I think this is really a profound way to run our camps and to run our teams. So managers are in charge at a couple of different levels. Like, how do they do their leadership and their culture in their camp community? And so we wanted to speak into that space too. And yeah, all of this had a profound impact. Yeah, and so that's where we're at with New Zealand. And so now Jenny and I are on speed dial, I think. When Jenny has an issue in one of these spaces, she's like, Chris, how do I solve this problem? So that's the New Zealand's experience. So now comes the part that I know the least about and that you guys know the most about, because this is the global experience. So what are the needs of global camping community across the globe? And I guess obviously the COVID recovery is going to be massive. Mental and emotional health has really high needs. And we're in this place now, I'm sure, where financial stability is going to be really important. So I guess we're all wondering what camping's going to look like. And one of the hard parts for me in presenting this talk is like, I'm not really sure whether I can speak into some of the solutions for those three biggies there of getting over COVID, of mental and emotional health and of financial stability. But I know one thing that I've learned in developing Kingdom Camping, that it's about connection. And when we do connection really well, and we learn how to be vulnerable and intimate and present with each other, then we can start to create a place that's safe, and God can be speaking more to you. You can be speaking more to other people in a way that solutions can be found. And so I'm excited about what that would look like. And so our goal now at Lighthouse Leadership with Kingdom Camping modality is to keep creating camps full of people who know their value, identity, and purpose. To build, and this is the mandate I'm on at the moment, to build prophetic facilitators who are highly skilled at leadership and facilitating in the natural, so with people, and in the supernatural. One of the outcomes that we've had here that's been really amazing is having facilitators who've become much more Holy Spirit aware. And so when they're right in the middle of being active with kids, and Holy Spirit says, no, don't do that one now, do this one now. And they can shift and go with what Holy Spirit is suggesting that they do. That's the kind of skill and quality that we want in our facilitators across the globe. And then how to grow camp managers who can lead in a highly relational leadership manner and be catalysts of kingdom culture. The book goes on to speak a lot more about the role of prayer and the role of camps in our general community. I actually think that we're primed for camps because they see so many kids to actually shift culture in the local area and in regions and possibly in nations, because so many kids come to camp, so many kids get influenced by these ideas. And I'm really interested in, can I call it the apostolic potential of camping across the globe to really grow these kind of value sets in young people that come to camp. Yeah, and so that's probably briefly shares what Kingdom Camping is about. And the book's available on Amazon, and we're looking into how we can get it printed, but there are e-copies available, and Vicky and I had a chat before. She's going to send out how to get a copy of that. We've made it as cheap as we could. It's about $9 US. We just want it, to get it out to help you do whatever it is that you need to do. Yeah, that's sort of where we're at. And so I wonder now if we could kick to a few questions. I've got a few things up my sleeve to share if the questions go in that direction. But otherwise, over to you, Jenny.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I got to preview the book before it was finished, and it was exciting to just see that journey of the 7 years, and I guess how God had actually unpacked it a bit more. And when you saw it on paper, it just made such incredible sense of how we can get these young people to lead themselves and then to have the ability to lead others. And I think it's so significant for young people. And I remember talking to a parent after one of these training sessions, and they were girls that were twins. And the parents said that these kids had the potential to go right or left, but they chose to keep going forward. And it was just such an encouragement to them as parents to see that growth and development in the young person, for them to being able to identify who they are in God and what their future might look like. And both girls took different pathways. One stayed in camping and one went off to get educated. But that's just examples of the benefit of this particularly fast track training that is quite intensive and has a year's expectation, and Chris coaching them month by month, and them being able to ask the questions, how do I do this better? What should I have done in this situation? And I think that's what young people long for, is someone to connect with, to ask some tough questions. So Chris and Gretchen have been really significant in that. It's about being salt and light, isn't it?
It is.
I think, our communities actually need us. I think one of the things I've always probably struggled with in camping is that we have this concept that everybody has to come to us, whereas actually I
Yeah.
think we should be actually going to the community as well, being in the community. I don't know what that looks like, but I think that's equally as important, is
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be a representative in our communities, whatever that might look like.
This was one of the heart transformations that we needed to learn right back at the start. We needed to change our heart, not only for the kids and for each other, but we needed to ask God for his heart for our community, and ask God for his heart for our town and his heart for our nation. And it's kind of funny, when we started to get that, our ministry and our work was much easier. We were not pushing stuff uphill so much, because we were just letting God out of us because he'd already filled our heart with his perspective on stuff.
So, Chris, is there anything else you'd like to share before we close up?
Maybe I just share one idea,
Yes.
and this is just to give everybody something practical to walk away with. This are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 threads that I use in building all of my camps, so that I can weave kingdom culture into them. And so these might be practicals that people that hear this today can just walk away and just reflect, hey, how am I going with these 7 threads? Do I want to change or maximize something here? So the first thread that we always run through is fun. And we want fun through games and laughter. The second thing is honor. And we want to treat each other really well, like better than we normally would. Better than at home, better than at school. We're trying to let camp be a model that shows people how good community can be. And we do this through lifting people up. I often say at the facilitation training, if you get tired at the end of a day of camping, it should be from praising people. So encourage, encourage, encourage. The next thread that we run is trust. And we run trust through, and the great thing about camping is we can do physical trust stuff through risk and using modified risk. And we can also do emotional trust stuff through building conversations around difficult topics. So this is a thread we run. Empowerment. We want to give campers choice. And so we do this in lots of different ways. We let them choose who goes first for dinner rather than we're telling them. We run some electives and they get to choose what to do. Simple ways that we can empower them. We want to run the thread of growth, and we need, particularly in the West, I don't know what it's like everywhere else, Australia, New Zealand has a very strong shame culture, a tall poppy culture. And so we love cutting down people who stand a bit too high. And so we actually need to grow in this thread, or teach people this thread, that they actually grow through experiencing failure and making failure okay. And then the next one is to put in the thread of feedback. How do we create open, honest feedback? And so whenever I'm designing a camp and shaping it to do what it needs to do over the 3, 4, 5 days, I always have a plot for where I do these 7 things. And I want to maximize my fun here. I want to maximize honor here. Trust needs to peak here. Choice needs to grow to here. Feedback needs to be real. Yeah. And they're the kind of questions I'm asking as I design my camp. So I give that to you as something to reflect on as a camp manager for your team, and a camp designer, if that's your job. Nice. Well, that's probably me. Like, I could speak on this for weeks and weeks and weeks, because there's so much to it. But thank you so much from Gretchen and myself for the opportunity to invest ourselves and invest what God's put in us with Kingdom Camping International. And it's so awesome to be online with so many of my New Zealand friends. Thank you so much for joining in. It's so great to see you.
Thank you, Chris. It's pretty exciting. So thank you.